Hi
Hey.
everyone. Sorry, it's a little bit loud in the city. Of course, the siren has to be going by right now. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're gonna give it maybe like 2 more minutes. Jazz will pull up her screen. We'll do an introduction and then we'll get started.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it is 1 p.m. I don't want to keep anybody waiting too long. If anything, I'll just keep admitting people as they come. So if you hear a little ding in the background, sorry, it's just us letting more people in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our webinar. This is our monthly for this month. We will be hearing from Jaswant today. She's going to be presenting on the topic of mastering a signature textile print. So without any further ado, I will hand it over to Jazz and we'll get started.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So nice to meet you. Just gonna share the screen. Firstly, I just want to say a big thank you. Let me just minimize this. There we go. To New York School of Design for the opportunity. It's always a joy to work with you. I've actually watched the other webinar sessions and I'm in amazing company. So I feel very honored to be given this opportunity. So thank you so much for that. So today we're going to look at designing a signature textile print. So before we go into that, I thought I would give you a little intro about me, because you're probably wondering who I am and the kind of business that I run and the work that I do, and then we'll jump into the main topic at hand. So we're going to have a little about me, discuss the importance of a print. Then we want to deep dive into the key stages to identify when developing a print language, look at the technical process or the main 5 processes when it comes to actually putting your patterns into a textile, and then a few tips on how to actually develop your signature style as well. So really looking forward to jumping into this. Please, any questions, we'll do a Q&A at the end, but you're free to kind of ask me as we go through it as well. So a little bit about me. My name's Jazz. You can call me Jazz. I run a fashion and textile consultancy based in the UK. So I've worked in industry for around just about 10 plus years in both the fashion and textile sector. Worked with a lot of large global brands in the automotive industry, sports industry, so a lot of activewear, like Aston Martin, Hyundai, Toyota, developing large sort of full global licensed range plans and collections for garments and accessories. This was over men's, women's, and juniors as well. So really had a broad scope of a wide product range. Worked with other businesses as well. But then once I had my daughter, I decided that kind of pace wasn't going to suit my lifestyle. So I set up my own consultancy about 5 years ago, and I've been working nonstop since. So I work with a lot of fashion brands, including developed brands, but also startups. I have a lot of agreements with interior design firms where I'll design exclusively for them, and much more, but I'll show you a few examples of that. So it's a really kind of end-to-end service where we take things from the early conceptual phase through to the technical design. So a lot of if any students are online today, a lot of the stuff that you learn in your lessons, sort of technical design, CAD work, through to production and manufacturing coordination as well. So I really want to reiterate that this was kind of a tiered approach. I started with a textile background, and then I added the fashion on top, and then I kind of got into my groove and realized where my sort of passions and interests and skill set was really shining. So I hope you don't look at this and think, um, you have to do it all or have to do it all at once. This was kind of a gradual progression of finding what really spoke to me as a creative, and yeah, it really sparked my sort of joy in my work as well. So if I just show you a few examples of my work, I've got three main pillars to my work. So we have the apparel sector, so the fashion, the interiors. So mainly when it comes to interiors, it will be sort of developing whole collections, a lot of art licensing. And generally, I find that the interiors is more in the sort of luxury sector. So you're looking at sort of wallpapers that sell for over $120 per meter. So quite expensive there. And textiles is more in a general sense when we look at things like art licensing. So you can actually be developing print designs as a full-time job, and you can be developing collections and just sell the rights to them as well, which is really kind of a nice prong to the business. So between the three, I found that there's always work, but it's always varied work. And something that's consistent throughout that is having a solid understanding of textile prints, because by definition, a textile is not just limited to a garment. It can be on any surface that is woven or knitted or non-woven. So I really would encourage everyone to think of themselves as sort of overall creatives rather than just one singular job role, and see how you could take those transferable skills anywhere that you'd want to. So a few examples of my work. I just wanted to show some examples that were more print led. So you could see some examples of them in kind of situations. So this is an example of a brand in Australia, and you can see from the designs that it's very much a print-led collection. I know this is just one outfit, but for this particular project and for this particular client, I do all the technical design. So I'll actually design the shirts, the skirts, the sarongs, the accessories, but also sistering that will be working on the prints that are going to be combined with them. So it's like a dual kind of service where we can actually tailor a complete collection and really bring something unique to life. For example, for this client, it was more so a case of my client actually loved doing sort of hand painted paintings, just these sort of small studies, and she'd collected loads of them. And she wanted me to bring them to life for her. So that's how my consultancy came in and helped with this. Here's another example from the same client, but you can see how sort of the print positioning and the language of the print is key in kind of taking this from a relatively simple design and elevating it to something that feels unique just to that brand. Another example from a client from America. This was more so working in a sense of bringing sort of initial ideas that the client had and enhancing them and getting them to manufacturer ready. So it was designing the prints, but also setting up a supply chain with a manufacturer and making sure that there was no time or money wasted. Because with a lot of clients, they will have saved a lot of money, put it aside, and they're ready to sort of launch their dreams. So I really respect that and take people's time and money really seriously. So the decisions that I make and the work that I provide for them must translate into saleable goods, something really important to understand. Another example from the same project, a nice example as well of how something that was working on an accessory can actually can be repurposed and kind of redesigned slightly to work on a different product as well. So something I would encourage throughout this talk is actually, if you are looking into print design, it's not a single prong approach. Think of it of a library of artwork that you could be constantly adapting and constantly getting multi-use out of, because it does take a lot of time to develop. Some examples of something a little bit more streetwear, using different applications as well. Print design doesn't always have to be this really kind of over the top feminine approach. You can do things that are sort of pared back streetwear, a little bit more with a masculine touch as well. So these are some examples of some work on some shorts and t-shirts for a client in America. And I also do a lot of active wear. So I'm like a lead consultant, the only consultant for UK's largest hockey apparel brand. We work on men's, women's, juniors ranges. And these are just a few examples of how just understanding print techniques, whilst not in every product, it needs to be able to cross over an entire collection. So we've got some screen print on the t-shirts here, and it just shows that we need to be able to understand even the more practical side. So if you're going to be printing on a wash care label or a branding that's just going to be on the sizing info on the inner back neck, we need to be able to understand the correct profile and the correct sort of information to do so. Oh, and just to show some of my CAD work, these are just some examples of some sort of textile prints. This was done on a silk lining on a bomber jacket. This was done on a men's shirting, and how print generally can start as quite a nucleus to a collection, and you can expand on it with things that are a little bit more pared back, and you can have pieces that are a little bit more print heavy. So how do we actually create like a core print or a print collection and have dominant and accent kind of prints that complement that as well? That's a really nice tool that we'll talk about in this talk as well. And finally, I just wanted to show this as an example because it's important to realize that it's really about having your own personal lens and view. So you might have a very strong core theme, but it will be difficult to summarize that in, you know, one or two colors. So how do you actually develop a strong color palette and a really cohesive print language? That means you could create a collection, but everything doesn't have to look the same. There can be commonalities and a through line, and it can have your signature sort of touch to it without being, you know, just a quick color change. It can still have its own identity as a product. Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone else who's just joined. Just quickly want to touch on the importance of a textile print. Now, we must remember when we're talking about a printed textiles, this is not something that is woven into the fabric. This is purely surface design level. So you will have a fabric that is readily knitted or woven, and we are talking about the print or the pattern or the artwork that you lay on top. Now, what this allows you to do is basically customize and personalize a fabric that you could pretty much pick up from any store. It could be a recycled thing, a repurposing, it could be brand new on a fresh roll, it doesn't matter, and add your own identity onto it. This is actually a much more cost-effective way than actually thinking of, I want to implement some sort of print or pattern within the textile, so knitted or woven in. So it gives us an opportunity within our budget, whatever your budget is, to really stamp your identity and what do you actually have to say to the world. A really beautiful, beautiful exploration of your unique lens as a creative can be explored through the textile and the print on top of the textile. So let's just jump into the key stages when developing a print style. Now, I know a lot of people might say, well, I just have a kind of a style already and I just want to put it on a fabric. which is very valid. You might have a hobby or a sistering kind of skill set. You might like photography, you might like painting, and you think, okay, I just want to put it on a textile, let's get on with that. But I want to introduce these key stages to really consider before you do that. What's really important with actually introducing print into textile is that a textile or a fabric on its own is already an expensive investment. If you actually don't consider these key stages when you go to customize a textile, it's a real loss in capital. It's really devastating, and we actually want this to be a really positive, savvy business decision for your brand and for all of your creative ideas in your head. So I actually start with the end use. Now, whilst this could change slightly over time, it's really key to actually be identifying what is the actual end purpose of the print design. So before you even put pen to paper, so to speak, we need to identify what is actually going to be the function of this print. What product is it going to be on? This is the difference between having art and having design, is that we apply it to this end use, this product that we're going to use it on. When we actually can apply this, we can actually start impacting a lot of the other decisions. So think of things like color, scale, repeat. So something to think about, whilst you can actually think of a print in a general sense, if we can actually start honing it in and start pairing things together in terms of what will be the final use, this is actually going to streamline a lot of the next decisions that we look at in the slides. And target market. This might seem very far-fetched and far removed from an actual print design, but it's very critical, because when we're actually thinking about where this print is going to be positioned, we need to think about the kind of taste levels and appetite of the market. So we're looking generally at the demographic of age, sex, lifestyle, personality. Budget is a huge one as well, because depending on how customized your textile is, it is going to be more expensive to produce. So does that actually align with your target market? Is it something that will actually be affordable at a retail price? And how, why, when, and where will they use this product? And what does this print convey about them? So it's really critical to start just kind of plotting these in before we actually start designing our signature print, so to speak. And color. So color plays a huge role in your identity as a brand or as a creative, or your overall messaging in a collection. But it also means a lot to your consumer as well, and how kind of they read your collection or they read your printed textile. So for some designs, you might feel like you want some kind of dominant colors and you want them to really pop out. For others, colors might be more pared back and what we call like an accent color. Generally, when it comes to print designs, now there's no rules in terms of colors, but I have found it's nice to have no more than 3 predominant colors, and then you can kind of have your accent ones around there. If you want to go for something completely chaotic, that's fine as well, but this is something that I found is quite nice to streamline the approach. Now, scale. It might feel like scale is something we can edit afterwards, but it actually has a direct link to the steps before that. So we've identified our end use product. We've had a think about the overall consumer, and we've had a little think about the color as well. But now we need to start thinking about proportion and scale and ratio, because this is going to directly affect what type of print you use and how it will actually sit on the end product. So if you look at some images here, we've got completely different approaches to print. So we've got kind of like an oversized branding approach. This ratio and scale will be indicative of all of the decisions that you make in terms of the sizing, how your product will drape, the sweatshirt will drape on the body, and how we actually get the print position so we can see it in an effective way. This sort of cord set at the bottom, this is actually called like we're symmetrically lining up the print on the top. So we will have to kind of design our artwork in a way that will work perfectly for that. For the trousers, you've seen that they've not bothered to do that, which is fine as well. But this scale and this proportion, how is it actually going to sit on the body? And also the quality of our files will dictate that as well. If you feel like you're more of a storyteller and you want something that kind of sits over the body form and kind of drapes over and telling a narrative, this is a different approach as well to scale and how your print will sit on that end product. And then again, it doesn't have to just be one overall print. It can be a series of prints that come together and put in a more sporadic manner, depending on what your overall style is. I just want to reinforce scale one more time, just with a couple of things that have popped up in terms of trends. These are two examples of where paisleys have been used, and they will be prevalent next year in spring, summer. But purely because of the scale, so if I was to zoom into all of these images, based on the artwork, the paisleys are relatively similar. They're not too different. But when we actually play with scale and proportion and how many colors have been used and how we use things like symmetry and proportion, suddenly the same overall theme of paisley has completely transformed. So I really would encourage you to kind of have an end vision of the product and what the scale of the print would be as well, because this will dictate a lot of decisions that you make. And repeat type. So a repeat type, this goes more into being sort of a technical textile designer. So I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed if this is just too much information. There are full kind of university college degrees where you would have to learn this for 3-4 years, all of the ins and outs. But there are different repeat types when it comes to print design. And it's really something to keep in mind. So whatever your art form is that you enjoy or you'd like to translate, how would you actually like it to repeat on the textile? Is it something that's oversized and you see it a couple of times? Or is it something that's going to be distributed evenly all over the textile? Because this will determine the behavior of your textile, and actually your messaging as well. Like, what are you trying to actually sell and what are you trying to kind of portray in your textile? So there are different approaches. There's things called a full drop, a block repeat, where they just kind of sit sort of in line with each other. A half drop repeat, where you offset every row, so you get like a staggered approach. A brick repeat, where it goes offsets the other way, so you're seeing like a kind of disproportion of the same icon all the way through. Diamond repeat, a tossed repeat, you might be familiar with this. This can be done with as many elements as you like. I've kept it simple with one floral icon. And this is a pattern repeat where, you know, it's really condensed together and it all becomes kind of one textile. So these are just a few. There are a lot available, but something to look into when you're thinking of actually your overall repeat of it. How do you want your artwork to actually be staggered? And that always reflecting back to that end use, and will it actually work on the silhouettes that you're creating it for? Art, medium, and fabrication. So how do you actually create your art form? I really want everyone to be thinking about this, and it has to be something that, firstly, that you love and you feel is in line with you and your personal identity, your creative sort of outlet. It could be painting, drawing, digital graphics, photography, you name it. We can pretty much put anything on a textile, but we need to be able to apply it with the right kind of application print methods and the correct fabrics that would work for it. So what fabric will the print design be applied on? Think of the behavior and the movement and the overall lifespan of the end product and how these can all align. So something to think about from the offset, if it's something you're hoping to do in the future, develop your own collections or even just experiment with it. It's really, really special if you can kind of be developing your own unique hand, we call it. Whatever it is, whether you just like to do sketches or collage, it doesn't really matter what the art form is, but you can be developing something that just feels so unique to you, and it's a key identifier to your brand. And of course, print methods, we're going to look at them in a minute, but we need to be able to acknowledge which print methods we're going to use. They have different effects, they work on different fabrics, and they have a different performance level as well. And the big thing, they have different cost implications. So we always need to be pulling this back realistically to a budget. So our actual artwork and our actual designs need to work within the parameters of your business model and your budget, constantly thinking, what will our sort of end retail price be, and reverse engineer it back from there and see what print methods can align with that. And finally, for this portion, always think about context. Context is everything. My main takeaway when thinking about creating your own signature print is actually being able to delve in deeper than just something that looks nice to the eye. We need to have a really clear visual link to your collection themes. We should always remember that a print is open to interpretation. How you view it will be different to how your consumers or someone sat next to you will do it. So we need to be able to really refine that context, make sure our references are well vetted and well researched. And it's not just kind of just random things that we like. We need to be able to kind of back it up with context. It could be something historical, it could be something cultural, it could be a location that's inspired you, or you might have a muse that you want to dedicate your work to, like a musician or an actor or something like that. But there needs to be kind of like a broader sense of context as we go. Okay, I want to touch on the main technical processes, but I want to see, did anyone have any questions on what we just spoke about? Or are we okay to carry on? Yeah. Okay. So we've got the main technical processes. I want to touch on the 5 main print methods. Now, there are lots of subcategories when they come to print methods, but these are the 5 main ones, and generally they generally prong off these 5. Now, something to say sort of as a disclaimer, these are all very skilled crafts that are highly technical and they take time to develop. So I don't expect any of you to walk away from this and be able to go and do any of these straight away. But it is hopefully expanding your horizons of some approaches you could take. You can outsource these applications as well, or you can actually slowly go and learn how to do them and experiment with them as well. So we've got block print, roller print, screen print, heat transfer, and digital. Now, apart from digital print, the main sort of application and process of these are using like a paste or an emulsion, which is followed by a fixation. And then usually by steaming or heating it, we remove any excess color or excess sort of residue to make it permanent. I want to just show some videos of all of them and quickly talk through them, because I think it's better to actually show what these are like on person. Let me see. Can everyone see that okay? You don't need to see the sound. You don't need to hear the sound, to be honest. Yeah. Okay, so this is an example of, I'll put it on mute. This is an example of a hand blocked print. It's a very historical, beautiful, slow, intricate print form. It's the earliest print form that ever existed, and it's considered so artistic and such an artisan approach to printing. Now, it is very slow and it is purely based on kind of manual labor. So the process of it is through these engraved wooden blocks that are kind of stamped into the fabric. You will have to apply it per color. So per stencil you want to add, there will be a different engraved block for each kind of portion of the design. If this was something that you'd want to look into, you can actually go and get your own wood block engraved, and it will last you for life. So it's quite a special approach to printing. And if you feel like you want to do something that feels a little bit more of an artisan approach, really kind of honing in and honoring handcraft and sort of ancient artistry, hand block print is a lovely way to go. Then next we've got roller printing. So roller printing is what you do to have these separate rollers that are engraved, and it's normally done with like a copper or a metal. Each one of the rollers will have a different part of the design, and it's this continuous roll where you can see as we're going and it's going down the line, we're adding an extra layer to the artwork, and it's sort of making this complete design. This is really nice if you want to do like a seamless repeat that's continuous in large volumes, and you want to have a color consistency throughout. I would definitely say this is more for mass manufacturing. The setup costs would be huge if you wanted to do sort of like a small run. But if this is something, perhaps you go and work for another brand, this is a very popular choice. This is roller printing. There's two kind of very similar ones, one with an engraved one sort of roller and one that's just flat, and they both create kind of similar looks as well. And then we've got screen printing. I just wanted to show an example with like a silicone application. But this is when we actually transfer a stencil design onto a flat surface using like a mesh screen, ink, and squeegee. Now, it's a really beautiful approach to print design. You get the hand feel, so you actually are enhancing the surface texture of your textile as well. And you can pretty much customize it however you like. Generally, I know this is kind of like an ombre effect, but if you were going to do screen printing, it heavily relies on sort of manual labor. It can be done by machine as well, but there is this element of quality control there. There is an element of there can be mistakes, which can be quite fatal. If you get something on the fabric, it's impossible to get it out, and you've kind of wasted that small portion of the fabric. Also, another consideration with this is think about how much money you want to spend, because every color that you add as a separate layer will cost more money. So I often find with screen print, to work within a reasonable budget, it's better to actually keep it to kind of 2-3 colors and save your multicolor approach, more detailed artworks for other print methods. And then we've got heat transfer. Now there's quite a few different heat transfers, but I'll show you a popular one, which is called DTF, direct to fabric. Now, this is when the image is actually printed onto like a wax. So that paper there, it's actually like a wax sheet, and then it's transferred with extreme heat onto the fabric. It's easy, it's affordable. If you wanted to do a really small run, maybe you just want to sample something and see how it looks, it's something you could kind of outsource and get done relatively quick and relatively cheap. Now, if you really like sort of like this artwork, very detailed work, maybe you consider yourself an artist alongside a fashion designer, this is a really nice approach to actually feel like you're wearing your art. So high level of detail, as many colors as you like, it doesn't really matter. It's basically an A to B kind of transfer as you go. Depending on the quality of the heat transfer, it can be permanent or it can be semi-permanent. So it's worth sort of investigating into that as you go. And finally, in this bit, digital printing. Now, something to think about with digital print. So it's an inkjet-based method where we sort of print colorants onto a fabric. This is just like printing on paper in that sense. The fabric that you start with will always be white, and you will only get a transfer of color onto one side. Now, there is dual side digital printing that's developed, and it does exist, but it's a little bit harder to outsource that, and they generally take larger order quantities. Really nice, beautiful application of color, because we are not using any emulsions, dyes, pigments, incredibly eco-friendly. Whatever we print onto that fabric is all we are using. We are not having any waste afterwards. So you can actually get something printed exactly how much you want. For a sort of new brand or a young designer, it's actually quite cost effective, because you will have one small setup cost for the run, And then you can actually do sort of small runs and sort of experiment as you go. I often, especially with digital print, I sometimes will have lots of different artwork explorations printed off on one run, and I use them as swatches to just use as testers before I go into mass manufacturing. So a really nice application of print, but also something that you could do something to the finest of detail on. You could go down to the most minute dots per inch. So to a photographic level, you could be communicating your ideas on a fabric. With the other methods, there are still limitations on how fine you could go with the detail. But with digital print, it's limitless. And there's no limitation in terms of how many colors. It's just per yardage. You'll pay for that. You'll pay the same amount of money if you have 100 colors or you just have one color. Okay, now let's talk about your signature style. So I want to touch on this because I know this is the main premise of the entire talk, but obviously I don't know you and I don't know what your interests are, so I can't kind of give you a one-to-one approach on how to approach your signature style. But I'd like to give you a few tips alongside all of the things that we've just discussed to really just kind of solidify your own journey to develop your signature style. So what is a signature style? A signature style is an element of your artwork that makes it instantly recognizable as yours. So it's your own unique handwriting that defines your work. It's such a special opportunity as a creative to put your stamp on your work, to be able to have people from across the world be able to just glance at it and know that it's yours. This is such a beautiful relationship that we have with our silhouettes, with how we pattern cut, what we're actually thinking in terms of styling and accessorizing. It can all come together as a real representation of your brand. It's something that people will want to come back to you, whether it's a different collection or a different overall theme. You can have this as a key identifier of your brand. So a really nice opportunity to add this unique approach to your unique lens as a creative. I don't know if any of you feel like that sometimes you have all these ideas and you might go to a fabric store, but sometimes you don't feel like they're actually portraying a lot of your ideas that you had, so you sometimes have to settle for something. So this is where this kind of signature style comes in. So tip 1 is to experiment. Now, time and time again, I'll have people come to me or students or clients, and they feel a lot of pressure to actually put pen to paper or whatever your art form is and just create their best work as they go. When you're creating your own signature style, the beauty is actually in the experimentation. So often with a lot of clients, I will do kind of like a quick spec sheet of studies of lots of prints before we commit a lot of time and money into kind of testing and sampling, kind of just to see where the appetite is, what's actually resonating with you, and develop them further. You need to discover how you love and enjoy working. This is supposed to be your signature kind of masterpiece, your key communicator of your ideas. So it shouldn't be something that's just settling for something that you don't really enjoy doing. So it could be anything from simple fine line drawings to watercolored paintings, however you'd like to approach it. Now, when it comes to actually experimenting, it shouldn't just be limited to one form of media. This is something you could actually be exploring one style, but in different kind of approaches. One could be with paint, one could be with a fine liner, one could be with a watercolor, and kind of see what speaks to you and take it from there. Also, how will you actually create your artwork so that it's production ready? Are you going to be creating it by hand? Then it needs to be kind of scanned in and cleaned up on a CAD-based program like Photoshop or Illustrator. What will actually work for you? One of my key tips with this stage of experimentation as well is I always kind of pause when I've approached one layer. If you're doing it by hand, this is, by the way, not for CAD based. And I'll stop and I'll scan things in each time. So every time you're adding something or adding a different color, I always scan them in. So you've suddenly got this huge portfolio of sort of initial studies rather than just one final artwork. You have all of these experimentations, and you never know, you might go back to them after a month or two and fall in love with a few that you discarded earlier in the process. And secondly, dive into your research. It's really, really essential to apply a broader context to your chosen print medium. So how does it actually feel like your authentic hand? So when we think about this, we could be thinking about narrative, color, composition, and how you could actually expand on this to develop your own personal print language. So I always say, like, cast your net really wide, feel really inspired, see what actually speaks to you, see what's actually making you feel kind of passionate and interested in your work, and then research into what is it about the things that speak to you and are grabbing your interest. What is it that's actually capturing your eye, and research into it to just add further context. Now, just to add to this research prong of these few tips that I want to share with you, is I really encourage you to look at trends as well. Now, whilst a signature style sounds like it's something completely unique to you, so why would I need to look at something that's out there already? That's not the reason at all. The only reason I say this is because all the things that we've covered today, we've been looking at scale, end use, proportions, repeat patterns, applications. These are already out there, working with the finest craftsmanships, the finest designers in the world. They have all the access at their feet. They've done all the research, and they've actually done a lot of homework for us. So I'd always encourage you to kind of look at trends and see what's actually coming out or forecasted to come out for print designs as well, because it can just add an extra layer to your creativity. I'm not asking you to go and copy anyone, but I'm saying, why not? Why would I not want to see what my parameters are, what is actually possible, and then I can develop that further with my research as I go. This is not sort of just for prints. It could be your kind of colors, your kind of print style, how they've actually applied it, silhouettes, how it works on the end use product, you name it. It's just really good to kind of fuel the brain with that creativity. Variety. So I always encourage, when you're developing your signature style or your signature print, there must be enough variety. Now, your subject matter can be as niche or as broad as you like. And to be honest, you can have, it's good to have a signature dominant print and have these kind of sistering complementary prints. But I want you to think of your collection that you're designing of prints to be like a pop-up store that a consumer is walking into. And you need to have enough of a differentiator per print that people would actually maybe want to pick up a few products. If I just take the same print and I just change one color and we just, put this on multiple products, the actual conversion to sales is going to be lower than if I can create like a print narrative, like a world that you go into, and we can kind of start picking things and feel like, actually, I love this designer, I love their print style, and I actually want to kind of immerse myself in that world and buy multiple products. So there is this creative prong of like, don't be afraid to explore the same sort of theme, but in different ways. But we're also thinking this with our business hats as well, of how we can translate this directly into sales and make a successful brand for you. And lastly, but mostly and most largely, is actually the budget. So we've covered a lot of stuff today, but the truth is it all comes down to marrying this kind of the budget that you have and the performance and the sort of end visual and outcome of your product. So we always need to keep reflecting back to your personal budget for the project. Now, this also will always align with your target consumer, your sort of projected retail price, because in order to be able to penetrate the market that you want at the prices that you want, you need to be saving the money in the sort of cost side of things before it even hits the market. So the higher level of customization will mean a higher cost of production. So they always need to align with your market positioning and make sure, as much as I would encourage you to be as creative as you can be, it's a beautiful process to be actually applying print and pattern to a textile. We need to work within the parameters of like how much you can actually budget this for and how much you retail the product for. Thank you so much. Let me check the time. Yeah, just on time, 45 minutes. Thank you all so much for your time. I would love to take some questions if anyone has any. Hey.
Jazz, I do have one for you. So say that, anybody in this call is looking to maybe do something like you do, like start to freelance print. They've built their portfolio, they're ready to go. They think their ideas are wonderful and they want to put them out there. What would be their, maybe path? Like how would they go about getting to where, say, you are?
Yeah, great question. So I always say when it comes to a print design portfolio specifically, I say that actually this kind of experimental stage I was mentioning is really important. Now, when it comes to wanting to translate this into a job, there is actually no pressure to have years and years of experience. Mostly they are looking for, do you actually have the technical ability to actually produce a print design? I would encourage you to do this in two ways. So have a signature print style that shows your flair and creativity, but also have a portfolio that's in line with a more commercial setting. So think about actual themes that align with trends that could possibly be circular, so work throughout the year, and to show that you have this kind of creative, personalized approach to your design, but also you can apply this to a commercial sector as well. I feel like those two together can show that you're a well-rounded print designer and you can start approaching people. You need to have a portfolio of work though. It's a 100% visual game. You need to be able to show that you have the technical ability to translate an artistic form into a complete, ready saleable textile print.
Yeah, thank you. I think that more than covered it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Oh yeah, Philippa, I see you've got your hand raised. If you want to unmute yourself, you can totally hop in and speak, or you can type it into the chat box, and that goes for everyone.
Hi, Jazz. I'm based in Coventry, like you. So,
Oh, hi.
hi, I'm coming to the talk you're doing on Friday at the
Oh,
Powerhouse.
it's lovely to
Um,
meet you.
yeah, I'm kind of interested in the kind of ecology of what's around this and how much you're able to get work that you've designed produced in terms of printed and fabric locally, or how far afield you have to go to if you're not doing it yourself directly yourself. I'm imagining a lot of what you do is outsourced because of the scale of that you're working at. I may be wrong, but how much of that are you able to do within from a sustainable perspective? Are you able to do locally, or do you work nationally, or is it international? It'd be interesting just to hear
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
No, great question. Lovely to meet you. Looking forward to meeting you on Friday. So depending on the volume is the key indicator of where we're going to go. In terms of an eco-friendly option, I have actively been trying to doesn't matter where my clients are in the world, because most of them are international. I do try and source manufacturers that are as close to them as possible, just so we can reduce that carbon footprint. It's not always possible, but I'll definitely try my best. If we're going for anything over 100 meters, I will always go to sort of a larger scale manufacturer. There are places that are more local that will do smaller runs. I mean, even just locally, you can find local screen print studios. You can find people that can do heat transfer. You can quickly jump online and find sort of digital printers as well. So it is something you can actually start this at home with small quantities. The only one I would say you couldn't is sort of a roller printing approach, which is sort of like a mass manufacturing. But yeah, for anyone who's just wanting to experiment, this can be done in your local area. If you're going for like larger volumes and you want to kind of have economies of scale and be saving money for mass manufacturing, then I would encourage sort of going abroad to do that. Thank you. Ooh. Let's see, is anyone else got a question?
Let's see. All right. Well, if not, and I do want to just thank everybody for coming. If you wanted to review anything that Jazz has said, because we covered so much info, and Jazz, I have to say, I always like to ask questions because I like to know more from our speakers. But I mean, that was so comprehensive that I found myself struggling to even think of
Oh.
a question to ask. So if anybody does want to go back and review anything that Jazz has said, this webinar will be available on our website at nysd.edu through the events page. You can just scroll all the way down to the bottom, and she'll be among all of our other speakers who have spoken in the past. I just want to give maybe just one more second, one more opportunity for people to ask questions before we sign off. And thank you again, Jess, so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been such an honor. And I always enjoy working with you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we'll call it there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and join us next month. You can check on our events page to see next month's webinar as well. But we will see you then or
Thank
later.
you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.